So, hello everyone. Let's start. Today's live stream is about economic facts and fallacies by the book by Thomas Sowell. And in this interview by Peter Robinson, some of the sections like housing, price control, and things like these are covered. So let's do a breakdown. And today's Heroes of Freedom is dedicated to covering some of the basic facts, and this is especially in light of the recent elections that are going on, and that Fool is promoting socialism and flop policies that are already that have already a history of failing and are and still continue to sound good, but still produce failure. So let's start. Now, the start of the premise is that Joe, the myth that has been spread that without government housing will be expensive. So it is completely fallacious, and let's see how he rebuts it. Well, this is an open question to you all. What is going on? Rent controls have been introduced. Why is there still shortage? Why is there still high prices? I think I slipped the answer a bit, but still, anyone in the stream wants to take a guess about why the prices are still high? No sound. Am I not audible? Okay. Yeah. So if you know the answer that why even after rent controls the prices are so high, even here in India there is there are rent control. If you know the answer that why even after rent controls the prices are so high. Yeah. So yes, the answer is can hear you talking but not hear the Thomas or video when it was playing. Okay. Oh yeah. So the answer to that question is simply shortages. Okay, let's see what Thomas Sowell has to say. Yeah. So this is what ends the. Can't hear the YouTube video of Thomas. I don't. Wait, let me check. Let me reconnect. Okay, I think now you'll be able to hear it. So now it is it now I have read the manifesto you published in the Telegram. Please check with other audiences as well. Maybe it's an issue with me only, but I can hear you talking, but not on YouTube video. Yeah, I think now it will be audible. I can you confirm it again? Yeah,
Housing.
now it should be.
Economic facts and fallacies once again.
Yes.
If
Now
we
the
go
video is
back
playing and it should be audible.
to the
Right?
beginning of the 20th century, before government intervention became pervasive in housing markets, we find, and this is to me one of the most arresting assertions in the book, we find people paying a smaller
Yeah. So
percentage of their expenditures for housing than at the end of the 20th.
yeah. So basically, what ends up happening in rent control? Yeah. So basically, what ends up happening in rent control is that you control the low end and the mid tier housing, but what ends up happening is that no new house the housing simply stops because every new housing comes under rent control, so people are interested in building new houses. So what the government does is that it eases up luxury housing, and now what yeah, and now the second order effect is that when luxury housing becomes way more prevalent than ordinary or low end housing, so then naturally the expensive housing becomes much more common, and you have increase in prices again. And since politicians can't let that happen, then they have to step in and start subsidizing new housing. So this is a problem that they create themselves. Then they have to double down on the false solution that they have created. So this is what goes on, and this idiot who is trying to promote rent controls, that he will tax the rich and things like that. Similar things will play out. He'll introduce rent controls. Housing people will stop investing in housing. then the crisis will emerge. Then they will ease up. Then they will ease up housing for high ends, and then again the same cycle will continue. So these clowns will keep repeating the things. And yeah, like someone like Walter Williams, I posted a Walter Williams quote yesterday that economic education or economic literacy is what illiteracy is what keeps politicians in power. Otherwise, they would have been thrown out long ago. So, yeah, let's go for it.
Century. In 1901, housing costs took 23% of the average American family's spending. By 2003, it took 33% of a far larger amount of spending. What's going on?
What's going on is that they're restricting the amount of housing that can be built. And obviously, if you restrict the supply while the demand is growing, the prices will go up through the roof.
Cui bono? Who benefits from this arrangement?
Politicians, most of all.
How?
Because they get the reputation of being for the poor and the downtrodden, and that they're setting aside affordable housing units, usually in some token amounts. They are preventing the evil landlords from raising the rent by rent control, and they make, if they are able to keep the public paranoid that if they take off the rent control, it'll be just sky-high prices, and so they gain by that. Both the landlords and the tenants lose. They lose in different ways and to different extents. The tenants lose because they can't find a place to stay. The landlords lose because they don't make the profit they would have made otherwise. The builders lose because there's no demand for apartment buildings if nobody can make a profit on it.
All right. Economic facts.
Yeah, so this is a lose-lose proposition for all except the politicians. So tenants don't get good housing, and they don't. The landlords don't get good rent, and the construction people or builders don't get any new orders. So everyone is losing except the politicians. And funnily enough, when Milley came into power and he got rid of rent controls, housing rents automatically came down because the supply increased. So this is what happens. And if any clown says that rent control is necessary or prices will go up, show him the example of Argentina. The Argentine example was even quoted in the Australian Parliament. If you recently there is a clip available where some member of the parliament pointed out that how they are closely watching the Argentine model and seeing that due to removing of rent controls, it has led to decline in rents. So that's something that socialists can never understand. How can it happen that demand supply, the natural forces of market, can do such a thing? So this is interesting that clear economic illiteracy, they are taking advantage of the clear economic illiteracy of the public, and I think they are illiterate themselves as well, and this is resulting in creating system-wide damages. So that clown should be booted out.
The fallacies once again. Quote, where builders are allowed to construct homes and apartments without severe government restrictions, even growing populations and rising incomes do not cause housing prices to shoot up because the supply of newly constructed housing keeps up with the growing demand, as in Houston. Now, would you please contrast Houston with our own coastal California?
Oh my goodness. There couldn't be a greater
contrast. An easy one.
Yes, that's an easy one. Houston doesn't even have zoning laws. But whereas the building anything in coastal California is just an ordeal. I mean, you have to not only you have to go through all kinds of planning commissions. I've had the misfortune of sitting in on 2 planning commission meetings. I don't know what it did for my blood pressure watching these people. The discouragement is huge. So someone estimated, for example, a real estate company, that a house that would cost $155,000 in Houston would cost $1 million in San Francisco.
Right.
The same house.
Now, but Tom, what about a place like Las Vegas, which overbuilt dramatically, and now there are it's going to take who knows how many years for the already in place housing stock in Las Vegas to get purchased. Meanwhile, of course, it's declining. We could have used a little regulation there, couldn't we?
Well, the regulation was one of the problems. I don't think it's going to take years, unless the government.
Yeah. So in India, we have a similar example that, as we have seen that although prices have increased everywhere, but since Hyderabad has liberalized its FSI policies, and it has led to the construction, large construction, and as you can see here. Wait, let me share this photo. Yeah. So if you look at this photo, this photo is just 2 years apart. Like this is from first, the top one is from 2023, and the bottom was is from 2025. So as you can see that how liberalizing the FSI rules has led to such drastic development in Hyderabad, and so this is a clear. So this naturally, since this with this increase in supply, has been a decrease in prices, and this shows that how demand and supply, if let to operate, leads to the optimum pricing of optimum housing or pricing as compared to rent controls. And in America, the clear example being the contrast between Houston and San Francisco, or like currently the example they're giving of Las Vegas.
Governments intervene as it has to keep the prices from falling. The people who own the empty houses have every incentive to keep the prices from falling.
Yeah, and this thing is also little talked about, that when in fact what ends up happening is that some people some builders get interested in introducing housing restriction laws, because they know that if they build too much and the supply increases too much, then this will result in falling prices more. So they lobby the politicians to limit the supply so that they can enjoy the profits. So if you are thinking about that, who is really causing the problems? It's not exactly that like politicians are trying to save you. They are more trying to hand out favors to the cronies. They pretend that they're controlling rents for the benefit of the people, but it is much more about helping their builder friends out who will donate them to get them elected.
Falling. The people who own the empty houses have every incentive to rent the houses for whatever they can get. Whether that's, I mean, I had the very same problem here on the Stanford campus when I moved away, that I didn't sell my house immediately, and so I rented it out. And I rented it out for an amount that was $100 a month, less than the mortgage payment, because the alternative would be to have it sit empty and pay the whole mortgage payment myself.
Segment 2, race and economics. Economic facts and fallacies. Quote, few subjects produce more fallacies than race. Among these fallacies are that, now get ready, I'm going to give you a passage here. Race was the basis of slavery, that racism is the main reason for black-white differences in incomes, and in all the other aspects of life that depend on.
When we talk about racism in America and casteism in India, there are some parallels, but this doesn't mean that it is the same problem, or the nature is different. But still, if you think in terms of how the narrative built is that there is a constant exploitation going on, and how one group is at severe disadvantage, and what is being done to exploit it. So these elements have been picked up from the United States and have been copy pasted here to build the narrative.
An income. Moreover, there is often an implicit assumption that racism and discrimination are so closely linked that they go up or down together. Now, what you have produced is a handful of outrages, and we'll take them one at a time. How's that? Race wasn't the basis of slavery?
Oh, it's a simple historical matter. Slavery existed for thousands of years, as far back as there are any records of human beings. Archaeological finds suggest that slavery existed before human beings could read and write. So, a racial difference between the slaves and the enslavers, that is a relatively new phenomenon. You didn't have in ancient times the ability to go to another continent and move millions of people of a different race across the ocean. So you enslaved the people who were nearby. The Europeans enslaved Slavs for centuries before they brought the first black African to the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, but so you're not suggesting, you do not wish to say anything other than that slavery as practiced in the United States was, it may have been recent, but you'd be willing to grant that it was particularly perverse and destructive because race got mixed into it at that point, right?
Race got mixed into it in the United States more than anywhere else for a very simple reason. The United States was founded, as the Declaration said, of independence, said all men are created equal.
Right.
If that's true, then the only way you can justify slavery is to say that some men are less than men.
I see. So the racial
but in Brazil, where Brazil imported more slaves than the United States, there was no such ideology. Brazil was not a democratic country. The whole issue never arose.
I see. I see. All right. Race doesn't account for differences in black-white income?
No, the differences between income between Western Europeans and Eastern Europeans is greater than the difference between blacks and whites in the United States. Differences in income.
So, casteism is a separate issue, and the wealth disparity is a separate issue. The fallacy is that the politicians try to overlap it and suggest that because of casteism there is wealth disparity, while it has no basis. They are confusing correlation with causation.
Income are the rule; they are not the exception.
So, looking at all these sociological studies that show a persistent gap between African Americans in income and every other form of American in income is what? Useless? It tells us things that we don't need to know. It misleads us. How would you describe that?
Wrong, I think, sums it up. It is not true. Hispanics have a lower per capita income than blacks. Hispanic households and families have a higher income than black households and families, simply because the Hispanic families are larger.
Okay. Now, this last assertion, race and discrimination, you suggest, are not so closely linked that they move up and down together. First of all, distinguish the two, race and discrimination.
Racism is an attitude inside people's heads.
Right.
Discrimination is an overt act taking place outside in the real world.
Okay.
So not only with blacks, you find the same thing with Jews in previous centuries. That part of the United States where there was the most racism against blacks, namely the South,
right,
is where black construction workers were much more common than they were in the North, right on into the 20th century. Most people are unaware that in the South, blacks were the construction workers. I remember a professor at Howard University saying that when he was a boy in the South, his father pointed to some man on the street and said, he was the first white construction worker in this town.
And so what was going on there? The racism did not, so whites could think of blacks as somehow or other separate, but they'd still employ them. Because the market made it profitable to do so.
Yeah, in fact, yes. In fact, a law had to be passed to stop this because in the 20s, and particularly as the Depression got underway, black construction companies in the South using black non-union labor would come up to the North and underbid on government contracts, taking them away. And so this was very common, to the point where they passed the Davis-Bacon Act, which said that on government contracts you must pay the prevailing wage, which was translated almost invariably into the union wage.
Right. So your point on the distinction between racism and discrimination is, don't worry about racism. It's inside people's heads. You can't measure it. There's a strongly subjective, just forget about it. Concentrate only on discrimination. And the best answer to discrimination is to let markets operate, because then people will discover, it will tend to militate against discrimination.
Oh, yes,
when people have skills to offer, they'll be employed. Whatever this notion of racism in people's heads is, don't worry about that. Is that right?
Yeah, what I'm saying essentially is that racists may prefer one race to another, but they prefer themselves to everybody else.
so they'll do what's profitable.
That's right. That's right.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that was even true in South Africa under apartheid, that there were hundreds of construction companies in South Africa that were fined in a government crackdown because they were hiring more blacks and in higher positions than they were allowed to under the apartheid law, because that was where the money was.
All right. Segment 3, race and culture, economic facts and fallacies. A fallacy is that the current fatherless families so prevalent among contemporary blacks are a legacy of slavery. And what happened in the 1960s? First, because Americans was declining for years prior to the decade of the 1960s. But it was during the 1960s that crime rates began skyrocketing.
The justification of rioting, for one thing, and the holding back of the police. One of the big kill. There was horror across the country. People didn't notice that there were far fewer deaths in Chicago than there were in places where the
area. It became an economic disaster, and its unemployment rate was 3.4
kill. There was horror across the country. People didn't notice that there were far fewer deaths in Chicago than there were in places where the mayor came on and pleaded with people to behave and said, I understand your problems and all of that kind of stuff, none of which stops riots.
Although Detroit, once again, economic facts and fallacies, although Detroit had the worst of the riots, the poverty rate among Detroit's black population was only half of that of blacks nationwide. Its home ownership rate among blacks was the highest in the country, and its unemployment rate was 3.4% lower than among whites nationwide. Detroit did not have a massive riot because it was an economic disaster area. It became an economic disaster area after the riots.
Yes.
So again, what causes these riots? Once they get started, the governor does the wrong thing.
Yes.
But what starts them?
Oh, anything can start a riot. The question is, how do you stop them? And James Q. Wilson once said, the only thing that will stop the riot is overwhelming force on the scene. But you see, if you put overwhelming force on the scene, that will indeed stop the riot cold. But then the next day, the newspapers will say, why did the police overreact? I mean, there was just a little disturbance, and here comes.
Race is used as a sorting device for decision-making, even by people who are not racists. Thus, employers may be reluctant to hire young black males because these employers are aware of what a high proportion of them have been arrested or imprisoned, even if the employers have no antipathy to black people as such and readily hire older blacks or black females, close quote. Are you saying that discrimination, even on the basis of race, you're saying it can be rational? Mm-hmm. Do you want to suggest that it can be acceptable?
Well, that's a different question.
Yes,
but I do notice that among a group of employers who routinely check everyone for prison records, the hiring of young black males is greater than in the employers in general. Whereas once they realize,
if they find somebody whose record is clean, they'll take him. Fallacies potpourri. There are too many. Your favorite economist, didn't I hear you say that?
Not gone completely.
All right. Paul Krugman, writing in his New York Times blog, quote, since the late 1970s, the America I knew has unraveled. You might be willing to take that as we're no longer a middle-class society in which the benefits of economic growth are widely shared. Between 1979 and 2005, the real income of the median household rose only 13%, but the income of the richest 0.1% of Americans rose 296%, close quote. The rich are not only getting richer, they're becoming dramatically richer, while everybody else is treading water.
I love it. Well, all I have to hear is the word household income, and I know we're not serious.
Why?
Because households differ over time in size. They differ from one group to another in size, and they differ from one income level to another in size. For example, in the bottom 20% of households, there are 39 million people. In the top 20% of households, there are 64 million people. Over time, the households have been declining in size. So if you had a household in which at some point in the past there were 3 working adults,
Right.
and now the household has only 2 working adults, and the family is making the same money they always made, that is not stagnation. That is a 50% increase in per capita income, which may be why one of the adults goes off and establishes his own household. He can afford to. So household income are utter nonsense. If you're serious, you look at per capita income, because per capita means one person, and it always means one person. It doesn't mean one person in 1980, another, and 1.5 persons in 1930, and so it always means one person. So if you're looking for a legitimate comparison, that's what you do. If you're looking to score political points, you go to household income and family income, and voila, you have your political points.
All right. On per capita income, how's the country doing?
I haven't checked the latest figure. I'm sure. I know that in terms of real per capita income, the average income today will buy less than it could last year. I don't usually make predictions, but I suspect it will buy less next year.
All right. We'll come to the pessimism of Dr. Thomas Sowell in soon enough. Income inequality in women, economic facts and fallacies. Given the numerous factors that impact the incomes and employment of women differently from the way they impact the incomes and employment of men, it can hardly be surprising that there have been substantial income differences between the sexes. Okay, not quite as outrageous as you often are. Here it comes. Nor can all these differences be assumed to be negative on net balance for women. Close quote. Tom, you look at the difference in income between men, higher, women, lower, and you suggest that on average, women may actually be better off, or many women may be better off. You have to explain yourself.
Well, yeah, if you're making comparisons, again, you can't compare apples and oranges. When I was doing research for that particular chapter, I remember being amazed that there was a large difference in income between young male physicians and young female physicians.
Yeah, so here he's talking about like the gender Marxists particularly use this line of attack and to peddle their policies that there is this is patriarchy, this is gender discrimination, and things like that.
Physicians. Until I dug into the data and discovered that young male physicians work more than 5.
Yeah, and this wage gap that women earn only 60% or 70% of what a male earn. Rather than comparing with the composition, like if whether they are on the same position, whether they have the same working hours, even then are the female earning different? No, because the simple thing will be if you have to pay women less, then you simply employ more women. But this logic simply boggles their mind that yeah, this naturally a businessman who wants to earn more profit will definitely hire cheaper labor. But why doesn't he hire cheaper labor?
500 hours a year more than young female physicians. If you work 500 extra hours, chances are you'll get paid more. And as you go through many of the other differences, you find all kinds of explanations of that sort.
All right. Last item in the potpourri, the university in contemporary America. Now, don't get misty-eyed. Economic facts and fallacies, quote, in general, the way that higher education is financed, including the nonprofit status of most academic institutions, gives decision makers in academia far greater latitude in deciding what to do than is the case in enterprises whose survival depends on accommodating both those who receive their goods and services and those who supply the money. It is therefore not very surprising that many of the decisions made in the academic world serve the interests of those who make the decisions. Close quote.
Yeah. So, just like here in India, most academic institutions are non-profit. Similar thing goes on in America as well, and there too, like you have seen that this woke DEI stuff going on in American universities like Harvard, Columbia, and the likes. So this is a reflection that how when you don't let market forces operate, you essentially have delegated the decision making from the consumers to the politicians, and when politicians are interested in just gaining more and more political power, and they will use any medium necessary to exert that. So this is how it plays out.
You've been an academic virtually all your professional life. Let's just begin with the baseline question. If you had it to do over again, would you do it differently?
If I had to, I've thought about that a lot.
Have you really?
Yes, because when I
thought
was,
I would be asking you a question that would catch you by surprise.
No,
All
no,
right. Hard to do with you, Tom.
during my first month as an undergraduate at Harvard, I received a letter forwarded from Washington offering me a job as a photographer. And I've often thought, if I could go back to that time, would I in fact drop out of Harvard and go take the job, or would I continue slogging on? And I'd probably drop out and go take the job.
Would you really?
Yes.
So academia, there's a corrupting influence here. They get money to a large extent from government, all the student loans, all of it with the government is redistributing income from ordinary working Joes to fancy professors, fundamentally is what's going on and has been going on for decades, correct?
Yeah, and of course to the students.
And to the students.
Who riot when not enough of the taxpayers' money is given to them.
Has academia in America become, I don't even know quite how to ask the question, has it become more irresponsible? Did it reach a low point in the 60s and it's been recovering since? How do you think of it in those terms? Over time?
I think there was a break point in the 60s. I'm not sure it's recovered. I know in the 70s there was a lot of self-congratulation that we no longer have violence on campus. Yes, the campus were quiet, but it was the quiet of surrender, because people who would cause people to riot were not invited on campuses. People who would antagonize the students by their viewpoints were not hired as professors. One of the reasons why a few years ago, when the think tanks of the world were ranked, and Hoover was ranked #1, but most of the leading think tanks in those rankings were conservative think tanks. And I think there's a very simple reason for it. The kinds of top scholars who would normally be in academia were not in academia. And this is one of the places they could go and work with the kind of freedom that academic tenure is supposed to provide, but doesn't.
Segment 5, the prospect for the future.
Yeah, this is something that we need to talk about. Like, since government institutions are essentially under the control of politicians, so their priorities take precedence over the priorities of students or the market. So when what ends up happening is that whatever is the incentive, like if the politicians are interested in maintaining order, they will maintain order at all cost, and academics who may have different views or things like that, they will either harass them, either not promote them, or try to shoo them away from the limelight. So in this way, what ends up happening is that they essentially corner those who are not interested to join their, who don't toe their line, and those who are in, and keep only yes men. So like institutional capture goes on all the time, because different politicians, like politicians try to control like students, because they have ample free time, and they are interested in doing things. So what politicians basically do is that try to channelize their energy in the direction that favors them. So in this way, student politics gets politicized. Although the stakes are so low, and it makes no, and there is little difference on who the who is elected in a student body, but still politicians are so interested because they become future prospects for them, and once they capture them in this phase of like uh, they, they are able to hold them on, they get loyal workers and are able to hold them on much longer. Many of the politicians that we have right now started their careers as student politicians, because these universities that are controlled by politicians acts as funnel for them, and students don't go there to study or to research or things like that. They are much more interested in just climbing up the political hierarchy and gaining more and more political favors, and just which is basically just getting more votes and distributing more money. Like they don't attend classes, so they don't have any interest in they don't have any understanding of the world. They just think that they're talking to 5 10 cronies or people who have no understanding of the problem, because if they had understanding of the problem, they would have already solved it. But they think that this is they have roam around on the streets and they have done something like that, they have some greater understanding of the problem. So these half-baked, non-understanding academics are able to create such huge policy failures, and this is what we experience because of their ill education and just working for political favors and gains.
You begin Economic Facts and Fallacies with two quotations. One is the frontispiece for the whole book, and the other heads the first chapter. John Adams, your first quotation: facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Second quotation, economist Henry Rosovsky, quote, never underestimate the difficulty of changing false beliefs by facts, close quote. Now here's what throws me, Tom. That first quotation, John Adams, is a fundamentally optimistic quotation. John Adams is, of course, a Democrat. He helps to found the country, and in all his writing, all his life, he has this basic faith that people exposed to the facts and the evidence will come around and assimilate those facts and evidence and make decisions based on them. The second,
Yeah, this is the point. Like, what is the point of live streaming this, and what is the point of doing Heroes of Freedom? The point is that it may take time. Yeah, lies are much more common than facts, but this doesn't mean that lies have control over reality. Yeah, they may try to bend reality for some time, like the communists tried to lie their way to bend reality to their will, but it simply didn't happen, and the criminal enterprise that was the USSR simply collapsed because it couldn't deal with realities. And all socialist systems are bound to fail because they work on fallacies, myths, and lies, as compared to facts. And what capitalism and free markets promote is basically truth. It is the truest system that can exist. Why? Because it works on information, the correct information. Those who lie, those who cheat, are simply weeded out of the system. And those who work hard, those who are trustworthy, they get more and more appreciation, market appreciation, and as a result, they earn more. But this mentality that has been created, that the honest person doesn't earn anything or things like that, this is simply a socialist peddled myth, and this results in the entire ethos that if you are rich, you must have lied in some way. While yeah, this works because in a socialist system, to succeed, you have to lie. But in a free enterprise system, you don't have to lie. You don't have to deal with people who you don't like because you have plenty of options. But in socialist system, the options are so limited, the power is so concentrated that you have to deal with the only the criminals are able to rise in the limited avenues that provide opportunity for growth. So, and since there are so avenues for dissemination of information, they try to control reality, which simply is not possible, and they try to peddle lies, which simply don't work. So this is a long fight. This doesn't mean that we as libertarians are able to will be we just state a fact and then we'll be able to then the entire thing will be solved and we can go back home. No, this is a constant fight. You have to keep reiterating things. They will spread 1,000 lies. You have to repeat the facts a million times, but the facts will remain facts, and no matter how many ways they try to bend it, the realities will remain the same. The reality will remain that gender wage gap is a myth. The reality will same that the rent control doesn't work. The reality will remain the same that taxation taxation is theft. The reality will remain that inflation is taxation without legislation. These things cannot be changed, and since these things cannot be changed, each time new wave of socialists will try to create new reality, but each time they will fail. And the point of the entire exercise is to let you equip you with facts and stories and examples, so that if anyone tries to peddle fake narratives in front of you, you can counter him with facts in such a way that he is not if because they pretend to be logical like this. They pretend that communism is communism or Marxism is some scientific system, which it isn't. But when you present them facts, so either they accept the facts or buckle down, or they double down on their lies, which proves them that they are liar and they are not trustworthy anyway, and they are not conversing in a good faith, and they need to be exposed. So any truthful person will eventually come to realize that free market is the only solution to our problem, and any liar will continue to peddle socialism because he uses some vague Machiavellianism to uh, to pre- to preserve, because he's power hungry and he wants to preserve power for himself, and he's looking to rule over others in a fantasy and dictate others to whatever he thinks is right for everyone.
Quotation, couldn't be more pessimistic. Never underestimate the difficulty of changing false beliefs by facts. So on the scale of optimistic John Adams to pessimistic Henry Rosofsky, where's Tom Sowell?
I'm right there with Henry Rosofsky, or perhaps a little to his right.
Oh, you were supposed to say you're right in the middle. You're way over here. Really?
Yeah, I think that we're raising whole generations who regard facts as more or less optional. You have kids in elementary school who are being urged to take stands on political issues, to write letters to congressmen and presidents about nuclear energy. They're not a decade old, and they're being thrown these kinds of questions that could absorb the lifetime of a very brilliant and learned man. And they're being taught that it's important to have views, and they're not being taught that it's important to know what you're talking about. It's important to hear the opposite viewpoint, and more important, to learn how to distinguish why viewpoint A and viewpoint B are different and which one has the most evidence or logic behind it. They disregard that. They hear something and they hear some rhetoric and they run with it.
Tom, you saw the election of Barack Obama as a triumph of sheer vacuous hopefulness
Yes.
over seriousness and realism. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Since then, he's elected in November 2008. We've seen the emergence of the Tea Party, the recapturing of the House of Representatives by a large Republican majority. Just days ago, Congressman Paul
We've
a lot about race and economic facts and fallacies, and we've gone through that in this discussion. And frankly, it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
We think we've made progress, and the reverse is true in many ways.
Yeah, we've made progress.
Rate,
We've made progress in some respects. We've had painful retrogressions. I think in terms of education, there's no question in my mind that kids who grew up where I grew up in Harlem don't get nearly the education that I got when I was growing up there.
Okay, so let me put this question to you with regard to race. John, you remember John Rawls and his famous veil of ignorance.
Oh, yes.
So let's just say that you're a African-American child about to be born.
Mm-hmm.
Do you choose 1930s America, the year in which you were born, or do you choose America in 2011?
I'm afraid that if you're not born in the South, you would choose in the 1930s. In the 1940s, New York had one of the finest public education systems in the country. I came up from Charlotte, North Carolina, where kids from Charlotte.
How old were you when you came up?
9 years old.
Okay, so
kids were routinely put back.
Yeah, here he covers about how. Education standards have fallen over a period of time. So this is across the world. This phenomena has been seen. So the point is that these are repetitive things. These discourses have been said. Each year they try to repeat the script, like we want education, we want jobs, we want things like that. But they don't have any good solutions. The only good solutions the only people who have good solutions are us, and it is our job to present the alternative view to the problems that they have created. Like today they talked about that. Today Bihar, the NDA government in Bihar announced that they will be giving out 2 lakh rupees to 94 lakh parties, to 94 lakh families. So their solution to every problem is right now is just throw money. Since the GDP is growing, tax revenues are growing, let's just keep throwing money at everyone and see whether it's the problem. See, and the voters will get us elected, because the first time in their life they are directly getting something tangible out of the government, instead of relying on indirect schemes to which they are never able to take advantage of, except those who are administrating the scheme. So voter bribery is now they have run out of development ideas, because they are not willing to deregulate, they are not willing to curb the scope of action of the Bagudam. They are not interested in lowering taxes, they are not interested in maintaining law and order. Anything the only thing that they are interested in is just getting elected. And if getting elected means that if bribery is the easiest way to get elected, then they'll resort to bribery, they'll resort to more freebies, they'll provide as many things as as possible, because they think that those who pay taxes are those who pay taxes or who care about taxes are in a minority. So they are not interested. So it is our point, and it is our entire questions about this heroes of freedom is entirely about raising awareness among people and educating them better in such a way that they are able to question their politicians, that what are you doing, why are you doing this, and when there is this, why are you not doing this, when they have a better answer to the problems that we are facing, and it has been universally tested. And why are you applying a failed policy again and again, when we have better ways to doing things? So this is why we are doing Heroes of Freedom, and we'll continue to do it every Friday, every Monday, and we'll this one we did with Thomas Sowell, and we'll also be doing Milton Friedman, we'll be doing Amit Verma, and we'll basically be discussing every economic thinker who has contributed to development, and raise the awareness that people have, so that they can converse with all the socialist, like the default socialist narrative that we have. They can converse with them, like another talking about socialist discourse, like this stupid thing that expenditure should be in terms of percentage of GDP, like 5% of GDP should be dedicated to this, or 10% of GDP should be dedicated to that. This simply doesn't make any sense. India Inc. is not a property of the government. How can you decide? The GDP of GDP of the country doesn't equate with the revenue of the government. Like we promised yesterday that the spending will be spending will be in proportion to the revenue, not to the GDP. GDP is just an estimate. A 10%, like at 4 trillion, our economy is currently at 4 trillion. So even a 10% miscalculation of GDP means that we have missed the mark by 400 billion. And you can imagine 400 billion is almost equivalent to 3 or 4 TCS. So we are really dealing with an absurd assumption and absurd narrative that GDP should be that expenditure should be in proportion to GDP, which is fallacious. So these all things we'll counter, and we'll empower everyone to see policies in the right way, and try to persuade people in the right way. And thank you all for joining, and we'll keep continuing it on. Next Monday we'll have another lecture, and we'll cover another video. If you have some suggestions, do share them. Thank you all for joining. See you all next time.